Hello, my name is Sam Bell. We all know what happened on 9/11. The events on September 11, 2001 changed the United States in less than a day. The city and state of New York had no idea how to react to such an unexpected and unprecedented attack. Cartels spill illegal drugs and weapons over our borders every day. Countless incidents of drug violence and criminal activity are the result of this nationwide. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina caused damage in the South that no one was prepared for, and it took days for the federal government to get their assets together to go in to assist with the situation. But the federal government is not a first responder. The National Guard is. I spent 18 years in the Army Reserve and deployed to 2 wars and 1 stateside deployment for the Olympics. And I'm now in the National Guard, and I've lived through changes in the military and politics for the last 30 years and come to one simple conclusion. The reserves need to go, and the National Guard needs to increase in size. The reserves were started in 1908 with the intention of having a group of medical officers on standby if needed by the government for an emergency. And since then, they've grown in size, been used in every war, and both stateside and abroad, and they've done well. But their numbers have consistently dwindled since the end of the Cold War, meanwhile still eating up taxpayers' dollars. The National Guard is the oldest military force in the United States, actually predating the official existence of the United States itself. But that's not the point. What is the point is that not only does the Guard have a presence in all 54 states and territories in the United States, they go through the exact same training that the Army Reservists do, but they can also do other things that the Reservists cannot. And among them is pull armed security in the United States. Unless the President declares a state of martial law, Army Reservists cannot perform armed security. Where National Guard has a few legal differences, one of which being that they are a state's militia. So if the governor allows it, they can pull armed security in the states. Now, among the original purposes of the Army Reserve, among other things, is to be a backfiller to active duty forces that were off to fight what was thought of at the time was their most likely enemy, the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union collapsed in the late 80s, as we all know. After Desert Storm in 1991, it was realized that we didn't need as large of a standing military as we had. We had an unprecedented sweeping victory with about 500,000 U.S. soldiers there. Less than 150 U.S. forces were killed. And there were entire divisions, Army divisions, that were not used during this war. And one division is between 10 and 15,000 soldiers. So we just didn't need the military, a standing military of that size anymore. And although that was very unpopular at the time, especially, it was apparent that that was the right decision. Then during the events of and after 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, there was an immediate need for armed security. There wasn't enough local police and everything to provide that in proportion to the catastrophic events that had happened. Armed security would be to stop looting, stop people from performing criminal activity, protecting civilians, etc. Thousands of National Guardsmen and women came in to help in security, cleanup, and recovery in New York, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and in Louisiana in the South for the hurricane. Border states have a constant threat of illegal drugs and weapons. Federal agencies like the INS, DEA, DHS just can't watch the borders the way they'd like to. And not long after 9/11 occurred, the President started making his case to go to war against Muslim extremists. And the United States the units started getting ready to be called up, military units. And if they weren't fully staffed, they got fillers from other units or augmentees to fill those vacant positions in the unit. A lot of them weren't from the same command or even from the same state. And so it's hard to get a unit to run in a cohesive manner in wartime when there was a number of them that didn't even know each other. So as the war begins and the big machine is moving in the Middle East, there's an obvious need to increase the overall size of the military because the war wasn't coming to an end anytime soon. They realized that. So some people were thinking, well, should we have a draft? Well, a draft is a bad idea. If you have a draft, you're not only going to fill all these positions that are needed for soldiers, but you're going to need more military police and more legal personnel as well, because right now it's an all-volunteer army, and if you start putting in people against their will, you're going to have a huge increase in disciplinary problems. So it's not as simple as just, oh, let's just have a draft and have all these people go into the military. So that meant they started creating enlistment bonuses and other incentives to join. And they also lowered the standards. So enlistment bonuses, they were often tens of thousands of dollars to these people to join and fill positions of mediocre jobs as well as specialized jobs that we're still paying for. They lowered the moral standards, so people with more law violations, some of them violent crimes, some drug usage, increased drug usage charges were allowed to join. There's some felons that are joined during that time, and more often than not, that led to additional problems down the line, as well as hurting morale in the units as well. So in these new soldiers that join, there's an inherent time delay. So they join, but then they ship off to basic training in a few months or a year, and after a few months of basic training, then they go to their job training, but then they have to come back home, and then before they're even eligible to be put on the list to deploy. Meanwhile, some of these soldiers that have deployed, they're getting ready for their second deployment already. So that was a problem. So if the force can get streamlined and strengthened at the same time, this will reduce those problems while saving taxpayer dollars. If we get rid of the reserves, allow the senior reservists early retirement, we absorb the others, some of them will probably want to go active duty as well, that's fine. We'll have a larger, trained, deployable force at the ready, both stateside and overseas. The Army overall has approximately 1 million soldiers, including about 450,000 active duty, about 335,000 National Guard, and almost 200,000 reservists. But the National Guard usually doesn't share the same facilities as the reservists do. And we have different department heads as well for things like pay or supply, logistics, and administration. So the Guard headquarters is in each state or territory. It's usually in their capital city, not far from their capital. The capital for the reserves is in St. Louis, Missouri. So nationwide, if there's pay problems or pay issues or whatever, it's got to get processed through St. Louis. That's a lot of processing to go through one location. So we offer the early retirement to senior reservists. Reserve centers will be going away. That'll save millions of dollars. In most cases, the new larger Guard units can still use their existing facilities. So each state's militia will be strengthened in a very short period of time with trained, qualified soldiers. There'll be less federal taxes needed for the military because the state absorbs part of that cost for the state's militia, for the National Guard. And the active duty will increase as well very quickly with trained soldiers from the reserves that transferred over there. And so this streamlined action will clean up the entire Army component and add some validity to the newly established National Guard seat position at the Joint Chiefs in Washington, D.C. This will have lower operational costs without compromising our national security. In fact, with each state's militia being bolstered by 5 to 20% across the board, each state will be able to manage events that it needs to in a more effective and efficient manner. And they won't have to go through the bureaucracy and red tape of Washington, D.C. to get results and quick action. Thank you.